A pathetic weekend from the Yankees. So I talked about not accepting anything less than a sweep. What do the Yankees do? They don't even win the series. The Yankees are now 9-7 this season versus the Baltimore Orioles, a team that is 43-92 this season. Just let that sink in for a second. 43-92. They're the worst record in all of Major League Baseball, and the Yankees are 9-7 against them. Meanwhile, the Rays went 18-1 against these same Orioles. And the Yankees, they could have gotten swept. I mean, sure, I guess the Yankees in some world could have swept themselves, but the Yankees could have easily gotten swept. Home against Baltimore. Completely pathetic. Absolutely embarrassing by the Yankees. And we'll get into all of it, but again, what it means moving forward, the division, I think that's just about gone. And that was always probably going to be the case with the Yankees getting off to a rough start in the season and the Rays just being what they are. But look, the Yankees have a big series coming up with the Blue Jays here. Toronto is hot. They're 4 back on the loss side against the Yanks. And it's a 4-game series. So all of a sudden, Yankees better, get going quickly, because if they don't do well in this Toronto series, we could be looking at a whole different situation again. So, and what was also a huge blow this weekend was finding out that Jonathan Loaisiga was going on the IL. After Game 2, or I guess before Game 3, it was announced that he had a right rotator cuff strain, and that he won't be throwing for at least 10 days. So I really hope that's nothing too serious. I mean, I don't know what the Yankees are going to do without Jonathan Loaisiga in that bullpen. I'll say that right now. If he's not in the mix, the Yankees are in big trouble. That's one of the biggest injuries that they could possibly have. And that doesn't have really much at all, for the most part, it is related, but this is independent of the Yankees losing the series this weekend. But that's just Loaisiga. They better hope that he's healthy, because I don't think that they have what it takes for the rest of the bullpen to get it done. But just, this is a situation where, after the series, Boone talking about, I'm frustrated we didn't put our best foot forward, but decisions were made that, from the jump, where you can't really put your best foot forward. How could you when, some of the lineups, and more so just some of the bullpen decisions. But even with that all being said, this is a Baltimore team that had recently had an 18 or 19 game losing streak. And the Yankees hadn't done that well against Baltimore going into this. Just fucking brutal. So, Game 1, the Yankees win Game 1 in extra innings. They could have easily lost this one. It was John Means versus Nestor Cortes. And Nestor Cortes continues to be a bright light for this Yankee club. As Cortes, they had the lead when he left. He would end up not getting the win, but Cortes, just continues to be really solid. And, he ends up getting up 1 run in 5 2/3 innings. But in this one, Gio Urshela did not start any of these games. He would pinch hit in the last game, but he's dealing with with an injury. Gary Sanchez, what was interesting and fucked up, quite frankly, I think it began in this game, was Joey Gallo batting second, which is preposterous. It's asinine, quite frankly. And I know, he does walk. I get that. But he was batting about 140, 150 as a Yankee. And the sample size is increasing by the day. To bat him second is just a dereliction of duty. Seriously, I mean, it's just not. You want him getting the second most at-bats? Come on now. Let's be smart here. And then what was also interesting is Gary Sanchez batting ninth now. And that could be argued as to whether that should be or shouldn't be. I'm not going to make a huge deal about it, but this is what the Brain Trust came up with after, coming back from the West Coast, is that these are the lineup changes they were going to make. So Gleyber Torres returned as well, with very mixed results upon returning. With Gleyber, really for me, it's hard. He is a little hard to root for. Like, I can think of way worse, and I don't know. It's a really tough fall from grace for Gleyber Torres. But the Yanks would take the lead in this one. In the fourth, it would be Giancarlo Stanton hitting a home run, and Stanton, in this series, I guess it was a bit of a mixed bag. But Stanton, it was really the hero of Game One. Giancarlo Stanton, when he's in a good zone, he is tough to stop, and he just hits, just rockets all over the field. So Stanton gives the Yanks a 1-0 lead. And then in the bottom of the fifth, it would be a 1-out walk to Rougned Odor. Then Gary Sanchez singles to make it first and third 1-out. And again, on sac fly situations, it's first pitch hitting. And DJ LeMahieu does just that. When LeMahieu's going to right field, that's when he's at his best. He gets a sac fly, Odor scores and makes it 2-0 Yanks. So, and it was a big game for LeMahieu as well. And I like what I've seen from him more so lately with LeMahieu. I do. It's not going to be like it was the first two seasons as a Yankee, but it's improving. So that would make it 2-0. But then in the top of the sixth, the last batter that Nestor Cortez would face would be Trey Mancini. Mancini homers, makes it 2-1. Loaisiga comes in. This would be Loaiziga's last outing before going on, hitting the injured list. He would strike out Urias to keep it 2-1. But then unfortunately, in the seventh, Loaisiga with 1 out would give up a home run to former Yankee prospect Jorge Mateo. And Mateo had a pretty good weekend for Baltimore. Maybe, again, he always had potential. He was in the Sonny Gray trade to Oakland. Mateo homers off Loaisiga. Loaisiga hasn't been giving up home runs this season. I think this was the third home run he had given up. So really tough blow there and unexpected. And so that made it 2-2. Then Chad Green would pitch a scoreless eighth. Chapman pitches a scoreless ninth. We head to extras. And in extras, it would be Wandy Peralta coming in. And this was a bit of a rough series for Wandy Peralta, and not so unexpected that would eventually happen. But for Peralta, not a great series. In this inning, it could have been worse. I can't blame him so much so with the ghost runner on at second. Mullins strikes out to start. But then Ryan Mountcastle gets an RBI single. And then, and I felt like, Peralta got lucky. He walks Austin Hayes, and then Trey Mancini lines into double play where Torres catches it, he throws it to LeMahieu, and they double off Mountcastle. So Peralta, after the Mullins at bat, it wasn't great, but the Yankees did what they had to do to keep it at a 1-run game. Then in the 10th, they would pinch run Tyler Wade for Odor, which would prove to be a very smart decision. Gary Sanchez strikes out to start out the 10th, but off of I guess it had been Cole Sulser. It would be DJ LeMahieu with an RBI single where Wade barely scores. Only Tyler Wade, I think, would have. I guess maybe you can argue like Andrew Velasquez, but Wade, good base running, he scores. Huge tying hit for LeMahieu, and so that extends the game. What it extends to, though, in that inning is with Joey Gallo up, So LeMahieu would go to second on that RBI single as they would try to throw Wade out. LeMahieu goes to second. Then LeMahieu goes to third on a wild pitch. And so it is runner on third, 1 out with a chance to win the game. And Joey Gallo pops out and he heard the boo birds, and deservedly so. And at that point, he was below 200 on the entire season, which is right around where he is now. And it was it was a definite rock bottom. He had a good moment in this series that we'll talk about, but for Joey Gallo, it's just been bad. No other way to say it. And then after that, Aaron Judge grounds out, so it stays tied. Then in the 11th, it's Clay Holmes comes in, and Clay Holmes has been really, really good since the acquisition from Pittsburgh. Clay Holmes has got to be one of the more high leverage relievers in the pen, especially with Loaisiga now down. You're going to see Holmes in there in a lot of key spots, and so far, really good. And at first it was trouble. Urias gets a single, makes it first and third, no out. But then Holmes strands the runner on third. Santander pop out, Mateo with a fly out, which would not score the run, and then Gutierrez strikes out looking. So Holmes gets it done. It's 3-3 headed to the bottom of the inning with the ghost runner. Like I always say, if you don't score in that top half of the inning in extra innings, you're in big trouble. And right away, this would be off of Dylan Tate, Giancarlo Stanton gets an RBI single, and the Yankees win at 4-3. So in some ways fortunate to win this one, but you'll take a win any way you can get. And it seemed like, all right, they won a close one. Now let's take care of business in the next two. Would not be the case. Would not be the case. So game two would be Jordan Montgomery for the Yanks against righty Chris Ellis for the Orioles, who actually has been pitching well for them. I would assume it's sort of a short-term thing, but still, the Yankees were not going to hit until the seventh inning in this one. And Jordan Montgomery, the problem with Montgomery, I feel like, is you'd like to get a little bit more length out of Montgomery at times. He kind of, he gives you everything he has, but sometimes that's not. It'd be nice for him to just get deeper into ball games. But Montgomery in this one goes 4 2/3 and gives up 1 earned run. You're not going to complain with that. Like, you're absolute, but it was a bit of a tough go for Montgomery. And in this one, a lot of Yankees starters were on the bench. As in, no Sanchez after a long night the previous night. I mean, there's reasons for these things, but still, no Sanchez, no Voit, no Torres. So, and sometimes I don't mind that, but the Yankees just couldn't really hit in this one, as the Orioles take the lead in the fourth. Ironically enough, on a wild pitch. So it's a 1-out single for Mancini, a 2-out double for Severino. So a second and third 2-out, a long at bat to Jorge Mateo leads to a walk. And on that last pitch, they would call it a wild pitch on Montgomery. As it seemed like Higashioka could have kept that in front of him, but didn't. And so Baltimore makes it 1-0. And they would add on but before that, in the fifth, in that same fifth, not in that same fifth. The next inning, Clay Holmes comes on in a bases loaded 2-out situation and gets a strikeout of Urias. So a really clutch job by Holmes there. Then he strikes at the side of the sixth. So Holmes, 4 batters, 4 strikeouts, continues to be excellent. But in the top of the seventh, it would be Wandy Peralta. Like I said, Peralta didn't look good the night before and didn't look good in this one either. Double for Jahmai Jones, RBI double for Cedric Mullins. Then after a ground out by Mountcastle, which got Mullins the third, Austin Hayes gets an infield single where Peralta tries to get Mullins out of home. He unfortunately does not. And so that makes it 3-0 Baltimore. And at that point, they're in trouble. Lucas Licky does finish up and get the last couple of outs in that seventh. And then in the bottom of the seventh, the Yankees would finally get going a little bit as Rizzo would reach on an error. Gardner would walk. Sanchez would fly out and move Rizzo to third. And then Gleyber Torres would pinch hit for Velasquez. The Yankees had 3 straight pinch hitters in this one. Sanchez flies out, like I said. And then Torres gets an infield single. So their first hit, not a pretty one, but it gets the job done. And that cuts to 3-1. Then Luke Voit pinch hits for Wade. And in the moment, I didn't like this. Tyler Wade, I think he had walked earlier. He's been good at the plate. And in that situation, I just feel like Voigt's not a great pinch hitter to my knowledge. And what does he do? He grounds into a double play. So that ends the inning right there. Licky pitches a scoreless eighth. And then in the bottom of the eighth, a leadoff walk by LeMahieu. And then they bring in Jorge Lopez, and Joey Gallo comes through and hits a big game-tying 2-run homer to make it 3-3. So a lot is forgiven in that moment. I still believe that he should not be batting second, but that was a big home run to make it 3-3. We move to the top of the ninth, and Aroldis Chapman, he's not someone that you can fully trust. He just isn't. And you're going to make mistakes from time to time, but he's just not someone that you necessarily want in there in the big spots. And now with Loaisiga down, forget about it. He's going to be. So Mountcastle strikes out to start the inning, but he reaches on a wild pitch. So you knew right there that was going to be a problem, and it was. Austin Hayes then singles, Trey Mancini walks. So bases loaded, no out. He does get Arias to strike out looking, but then Pedro Severino on a full count gets a really big sacrifice fly to make it 4-3. And then the ninth, the Yankees would go down quietly. Gardner ground out, Sanchez pop out, Torres strike out, and that's it. So right then and there, I'm thinking, fuck, this is bad. Yankees did not get the sweep. So, but they would find a way to make it a lot worse. Yes, they would. As in the last game, they would blow a lead. And Corey Kluber, it's been tough. It's been tough. And honestly kind of reminds you a little bit of the beginning of the season for Kluber, where he was struggling going deep, and then he did turn it around. So I wouldn't lose all faith in Kluber, but there's no doubt he's not like really ready. He's just not looking so good. And, you know, he would go 3 2/3 innings, 2 earned runs. Again, you were hoping that he could maybe get you 5 innings. That would have been my hope. But in this one, more of the regular lineup. And, you know, Judge playing center field and Stanton playing right and Voit DHing seems to be more optimal to me than the Gardner lineup, but they're going to mix and match. And Baltimore would actually get out to the early lead. It would be Austin Hayes who would homer off of Kluber in the top of the second, but the Yankees would respond against Keegan Aiken. In the bottom of the second with 1 out, Voit would walk, Torres singles, Odor hit by a pitch, and then a grand slam by Gary Sanchez. So that was really big at the time, made it 4-1, and he wouldn't be done, but that would make it 4-1. Then in the fourth, Kluber with 1 out, Arias single, Severino double, then a sac fly for Mateo makes it 4-2, and then Gutierrez is hit by a pitch, so they bring in Joely Rodriguez to face Cedric Mullins, and he gets the strikeout. Again, Joely Rodriguez is a pretty solid lefty-to-lefty guy. And so that makes it 4-2. And then in the top of the fifth, it would be a couple of walks for Mancini and Stewart after Santander flied out. So they bring in Albert Abreu, and Abreu gets out of that inning. Hayes grounds out and Arias grounds out. So brought into a tough spot, Abreu comes through. Abreu was called up to replace Loaisiga on the roster. Then in the bottom of the fifth, walks to start the inning by LeMahieu and Gallo. Then after a fly-out by Judge and a strikeout by Stanton, they bring in the lefty to face Rizzo, which is a mistake at times because he's good against lefties, and he dunks an RBI single in. And that extends the Yankees' lead to 5-2, that Rizzo RBI single. And then in the top of the sixth, with 2 out, Kelvin Gutierrez is a ground ball to Gleyber Torres, and it ends up being a single on a play that should have absolutely been end of inning. Torres took way too long, way too nonchalant. The throw was not hard. It was kind of lollipopped, I guess, if you want to call it that. And Gutierrez was hustling and beat it out. That's unacceptable by Gleyber. That's the shit I'm talking about. You can't have that happen. And then, what do you know? When you make mistakes like that, they usually come back to bite, and they do. As Cedric Mullins hits a 2-run homer, a really big one to make it 5-4. That was off of Abreu. But he does get out of the inning with the lead. Then in the bottom of the sixth, the Yankees would get those runs back. Leadoff single by Torres, and then Odor flies out, and they bring in the righty to face Gary Sanchez. What does he do? He hits his 20th homer of the year, his 2nd homer of the game, 6th RBI of the game, and it's 7-4 Yanks. And now we go to the 7th inning, and this is where things get a little interesting as Andrew Heaney would come on. Now, it's a 3-run game, so like in some ways I can understand it, but still, the game was hanging in the balance. Chad Green probably should have been in this spot with the heart of the order, but he wasn't, and it was Heaney, and he didn't come through. And look, were there some bad breaks along the way there? Yes, but Andrew Heaney should not be pitching really in meaningful games, meaningful moments, or really he shouldn't even be on this team. Luis Gil, who is unbelievably good, is still in the minors. That's got to change at some point. Andrew Heaney cannot be trusted, plain and simple. It was a bad acquisition. Cashman needs to admit that and be done with it. So, leadoff hit by pitch to Mancini. You can't do that. Then a bit of a lucky single by DJ Stewart. Then a single by Austin Hayes. Then a 2-run double by Jahmai Jones. Makes it 7-6. He does get Severino pop out, but then Jorge Mateo on pitch 12. Again, Heaney couldn't put him away, and Jorge Mateo, former Yankee prospect, gets an RBI single to make it. He dunks it in there to make it 7-7. They then bring in Wandy Peralta for the third straight day, and he hasn't been good lately, and he promptly gives up an RBI single to Gutierrez. Makes it 8-7, and the Yankees would be done for the rest of the day. In the seventh, a one-out walk to Stanton, then Rizzo, and then Voit strikes out, and did not look good in the at-bat at all. And then Gleyber Torres grounds out. So there was a shot right there, but it didn't happen. Then Chad Green, he ends up pitching a 1-2-3-8 and a 1-2-3-9, which makes it sting even more that he wasn't in there while the Yankees still had the lead, or at least were tied. The Green innings ended up being useless. In the eighth, Urshela would pinch hit, line out, Sanchez ground out, then LeMahieu gets an infield single, and what do you know? Joey Gallo, what does he do? You guessed it right. He struck out. And then in the ninth, Tyler Wells, who's been good for the Orioles lately, puts the Yankees down 1-2-3. Judge, Stanton, Rizzo, that's it. Yankees lose the series to Baltimore. They're 7 out on the loss side of Tampa. They are 2 ahead on the loss side of Boston, and then 4 ahead on the loss side of Toronto, and as well, believe it or not, Seattle. Yeah. So Oakland has really fallen back. The Yankees are 5 ahead on the loss side of Oakland, but this is now a big 4-game series against Toronto. As again, 4 games on the loss side. It'll be Ryu versus Tyone. And I believe that Robbie Ray had actually pitched. Yeah, Yankees won't see Robbie Ray, which is good. Robbie Ray's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. So they do get lucky with that. Game 2 will be Steven Matz versus Garrett Cole. And then Game 3, so this is a 4-game series. Game 3 will be Alek Manoah, who did well in his major league debut against the Yankees early in the year, against, they haven't announced it yet. It'll probably either be Cortez, and there was also talk that maybe Heel would pitch in this series. So maybe that could be it. I don't know. And then Game 4 will be Barrios versus, again, potentially Montgomery, maybe Heel, something like that. So that crew. But this is going to be a tough series. The Yankees have struggled versus the AL East. They're 500 versus the Blue Jays so far this year, including being 2-4. I believe. Yeah, I think it's 2-4 at home against the Blue Jays this year. So they need to rectify that quickly. But the Yankees in the division are not very good. That's been a huge problem for them. And this is all of a sudden a really important series against Toronto. And we will see how it all begins as the Yankees have an afternoon Labor Day game to kick off this series against the Blue Jays. We'll see what happens. The Yankees need to really turn things around quickly after a just disgusting series against the Baltimore Orioles.